Hello guys, welcome back to Swigs Talks Football. Today we are talking about the predictions for this weekend's fixtures in Game Week 15 for the Premier League, and we're going to start things off with the 12:30 kickoff of Chelsea versus Newcastle. So, as of this recording, this is just before kickoff starts. So hopefully I get it right. Hopefully I do. And so I am going to go for a 2-all Desmond between Chelsea and Newcastle. Newcastle obviously coming off the back of a defeat against their rivals Sunderland last week with a 1-0 win for the Black Cats. And Chelsea come into this game in red hot form. They have been looking very good consistently. Reece James has looked really, really solid at the back this run of games that he's been in the team, at least for Chelsea. So I'm going to go for a 2-all draw with them. As well, I have my fixtures down off here to the right, just in case you wonder what Swig's looking at down on the right of him. But yeah, so it's just the fixtures just down here. So next up, we have Bournemouth versus Burnley. Now, Bournemouth, who had a game of the season contender, in my opinion, last Monday night against United, where they drew 4-all. They host the mighty Burnley. So Scott Parker seems to be on a bit of thin ice in terms of his job security, whether or not Burnley decides to sack him before January, or maybe even depending after how the window goes. I think this fixture is very crucial for Burnley and for mainly Parker himself. That being said, Bournemouth have been looking a bit inconsistent, in my opinion, the last couple of weeks. They've had some ups, they've had some downs, they haven't really kicked on, put a consecutive, I suppose, wins together on the bounce. But they host Burnley this weekend. And from what I've seen of Bournemouth, I think they'll have enough firepower, especially against the lack of firepower that Burnley have. I know Leslie Ugochukwu has been, doing well so far this year, but I don't know, I can't see Burnley really getting too much from this game. So that being said, my goal prediction for this is 2-1 Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth will have just too much for them, and so they will take the 3 points. Next up then, we have Brighton versus Sunderland. So this comes off the back end, like I said before, of Sunderland beating their rivals Newcastle 1-0 last weekend in what was a relatively boring enough game to watch. I managed to catch most of the game, about 65-75 minutes. But even from what I saw then, it wasn't great really from neither side. Neither side seemed to be wanting to take that risk and to take that step going forward to try and get the 3 points. But eventually Sunderland did. Sunderland got it, and hats off to them. If I was wearing a hat, I would tip it to them, because they managed to find a way to win, and they did. That being said, I think that with the emotion that was put into that game and that performance, I believe that Sunderland they'll maybe falter in this round against Brighton. So that being said, I think Brighton have looked well. They've looked decent enough this season. A few good performances, few shaky performances as well. But that being said, I think Brighton will have just enough. So I'm going for 2-1 win for Brighton this time round. Could be wrong though. Sunderland could surprise me and they'd kick on again. It would surprise me in the sense of how much effort they put in, and more the emotional side and psychological side that they seem to put in last week against Newcastle. Whereas this week, I suppose I'm imagining that they'll be on a little bit of a drain, but I could be wrong. Who knows? Next up, we have Man City versus West Ham United. So West Ham obviously had a great game last week against Villa, but failing to get over the line again. Seems to be the story of West Ham's season so far, in the sense that they lost 3-2 to Villa, and they go away to Manchester City. Now, City have just looked brilliant. They've not been like the old City, but they're definitely pushing it, getting nearer to that. You have the likes of Doku, who has just been fantastic this year. Foden, especially in the last 5 or 6 games, has really started to come back into it. Like what we saw two or 3 years ago when he won the Player of the Year award. And obviously Haaland up top. Cherky's been ticking the box. It seems that Pep has his set back 4 now, He seems to be a lot more stable and a lot more settled with it. You have Nunes, Diaz, Gvardiol, and Nico Riley, who's been, unbelievable for, a 20-year-old to just come in, slot away in there, left back, and just, seem like he's been doing it for years. I suppose he has been doing it for years, but just not in the first team. So yeah, I think that this will be an easy enough win for City. It seems like they've been doing easy enough wins now for the last month or 6 weeks or so. It seems that they've just been continuously pushing and pushing and pushing. So for that reason, I'm going Man City 3, West Ham 1. I do think that West Ham will nick a goal, but I would not be surprised if City, at being at home, won 3-0 or if it was a 4-0 game. I would not be surprised at all. Next up then, we have Wolves hosting the Buzzy Bees in Brentford. Wolves just have not got going. They've been unlucky in the last couple of fixtures, with just not getting over the line, not putting the ball in the back of the net. That's, that ultimately, that wins you games. So Wolves seem to be struggling with that. And then you have on the counter side of it, Brentford, who seem to be putting in great performances and still getting over the line. Not all the time, not all the time. They lost to Spurs and they weren't at the best. Spurs definitely weren't great either. I tell a lie, Spurs were actually very good that game, because that was the game Xavi actually decided to turn up for once. And so that was that. But in regards to this, I can only see a Brentford win. I cannot see Wolves. I can't. If they get a draw, I'd be amazed, but I can only see a Brentford win. I can see that it would be 50-50 in terms of possession, but I think Brentford will nick it. I think maybe a set piece, maybe a long throw in. That'll yeah. And I think 1-0. I think it's only going to just be a 1-0 win for Brentford, which will leave Wolves again in dire straits really. But yeah, 1-0 to the Buzzy Bees against Wolves. Then we have the 5:30 kickoff of my beloved Spurs against Liverpool. Spurs shambles, to say the least. The least said about them, the better. I think Liverpool seem to be on the rise. Spurs seem to be just consistently bad, without getting into too much of a negative spiral on this Saturday. Liverpool I can only see just ripping Spurs apart. Spurs haven't had a shocking home record, and Liverpool seem to be just thriving in the last 2 or 3 games at least anyways. I can only see Liverpool 2-0 easily. I can't see, if Spurs put up a fight I'd be happy, but they won't, because that's just not how we're setting up. Frank just isn't getting a tune out of them. I think some of the players need a right kick up the arse in terms of getting their heads swiveled on, because I think from what we saw even at the weekend gone, the likes of Spence coming off and throwing his ties out the pram like, why are you taking me off kind of jab. I think there needs to be we need a right keen figure or someone to go in there, shake the heads, get them going, get them, reel off that, what they're doing, you're not doing well. But for Frank as well, it's a two-way street. Frank isn't performing and neither are the players. So yeah, that's pretty much enough said about that, the better. So Liverpool 2, Spurs 0. That's what I'm going for. And then the 8:00 kickoff then tonight on Saturday, Everton, Arsenal. Everton, very good for home record for them, hosting Arsenal, who have been on a little bit of a rocky patch for them so far. But yeah, I can see it'll be a good game. I think it'll be even enough, but I can see Arsenal maybe winning. Arsenal will win. I think that Arsenal will win, but I think it'll be a good game for goals, in terms of, I think Arsenal 3, Everton 2. But yeah, because I think Everton are without Dewsbury Hall as well, so that'll be interesting to see how they've really relied on his creativity in the last 3 or 4 games. So it'll be interesting to see how they maybe adapt. Maybe Alvarez comes in at the 10, maybe Grealish comes in at the 10, and they might push the likes of Barry out, maybe left. Who knows? Or maybe Dibling gets an actual rare start on the right, Indai goes in the left, in the middle of the park, then Grealish on the left. But who knows? But yeah, the Gunners, I am thinking they will win, unfortunately. Then we go on to Sunday's games. So Sunday's first run, Leeds versus Palace. Leeds have been looking really good the last couple of weeks. Dominic Calvert-Lewin seems to be actually finishing his chances now, which is a great sign for Leeds. And then you have, I suppose the opposite then could be said for Palace. Palace drawing midweek. I know they fielded a ridiculously young team in the Conference League, drawing to, was it Casp or the Finnish champions in the Conference League. So while all the seniors will be mainly rested, you've some of the players, I think, there that probably need to step up a little bit more in terms of with Palace. But still, they're a really good side, really good team to watch. But for this result, I've gone with Leeds 2-1. I think Leeds will win. I think they're kicking on, and I'm hoping that DCL kicks on because I put him in the fantasy this week. So let's fingers crossed that he gets a double at least. But who knows? It could be just a purple patch, and he goes the next 4 months without score. But yeah, 2-1 to the Leeds. Next up, we have Villa versus United of Manchester. Just to make that clear, Villa have looked really strong, really consistent, really impressed with how Emery has been setting up his team. I watched the game against Arsenal. Brilliant performance from Villa for that. And even last week's performance then again against West Ham, they grinded out the result. They seem to be, luck seems to be going in their favour, which is really crucial, I suppose, at this time leading up to the the Christmas break and then the January transfer window. Be interesting to see how they get on with that. So I think Villa are well in around the title race, and I believe they'll kick that further. They will further along their title race challenge by beating Manchester United tomorrow. So I'm going to go with a Villa 2, United 1. But I would not be surprised if this is a 4-3 Villa, maybe even a 5-3. I'm a big fan of going for a 5-3 result ever since United Leicester. All those years back when Di Maria scored and lobbed Schmeichel. So ever since then, I tend to go for a 5-3 sometime or another. But stay tuned during maybe it'll be next the next round of fixtures that I'll say it. But for this, Villa 3, United 1. I'm going to go. Yeah, Villa 3, United 1. That's my final one. That's what I'm going to go for. And then the last fixture then, Fulham versus Forest. Forest obviously coming off the back of a great win against Spurs. 3-0. Spurs absolutely useless in that game, but we won't go into that again. And they are away, Forest, to Fulham. Fulham look red hot. They look great. Harry Wilson seems to be really hitting the good run of form now. He's already gotten more goals and assists. I think he's done 6 goals this season, whereas last season he only had 5. It's coming up to Christmas, so hopefully he kicks on now again. Has brought him also into the fantasy football. So we will see how that goes. And so I think Fulham, they seem to be clicking. The likes of Chukwueze, Wilson, like I said again, and maybe even Kevin can start maybe getting it going. I know he played in the cup a couple of days ago for that, and they looked fine. Fulham, I only watched the highlights, so they looked, from what I saw, was fine. But yeah, so I can see Fulham. I can see them winning. I think they're on a good run of form. Mark Silva is a really good coach, really good manager. I think he's going to get the best out of him. And with Wilson in red hot form, Smith Rowe also seeming to be getting back into the starting 11, which is a great sign for him. I can see them just having just enough for Forest, just enough, 2-1. But I think it'll be an entertaining game nonetheless. So yeah, that's my predictions for this week's and Game Week 15's Premier League predicts just before the Christmas. So yeah, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe down below. Get that red button. This is my first video, so hopefully you've enjoyed it. And hopefully this is the start of more things to come in terms of predicts, analysis, post-match reactions, and who knows, maybe watch-alongs as well in the near future. So comment, subscribe, all that jazz, all that good stuff. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Thanks.